spirit of trying new things, I read your favorite romance novels. I usually don't like most romance books because they're so predictable, they have no plot, they have filler angst to fill that very non-existent plot, and every character is kind of really basic and not complex in any way and follows a predictable pattern, and they don't really have chemistry, and honestly their relationship is sometimes filled with red flags. However, that being said, I do recognize that that's what they're written for easy pleasure, for your enjoyment, and if you want to read them in your spare time, I absolutely won't judge you for it. All reviews are spoiler-free. First up, Verity, a romantic thriller, and when I heard that title, I literally said to myself, if the main character falls in love with her kidnapper, that is Stockholm Syndrome, and I do not want to read this. But actually, it turned out to be pretty decent. Well, the thriller parts were great, fantastic, love, but the romance parts, the chemistry was non-existent. The two characters had no reason to be together. One of them was a guy who was literally a psychopath and wanted to be with the first girl that smiled at him, and the second girl, the second person, the girl, she was literally a meddling, disturbed woman who was worse than the so-called villain of the story. Prepare yourself, because the main character, for some reason, has a sense of self-control. No sense of self-preservation, but a sense of self-control. The plot is that she's a mediocre author who gets asked to ghostwrite for this woman named Verity, and so she moves into her gothic manor because Verity had an accident and she needs her to finish the books. And as she's working on the books that Verity asked her to write, she is reading the manuscript that Verity left, her autobiography, where Verity shares some of the most disturbing things and thoughts ever. And so our main character decides that the best course of action is to continue living in this manor, reading one chapter at a time because, oh, I don't want to meddle. So instead, she takes Xanax that does absolutely nothing for her sleepwalking problems, gets the husband to lock her from the outside and from the inside because she's scared of Verity, and she falls in love with him and starts to impose her paranoia onto him, while continuing to live in this creepy gothic manor with a deranged woman.
Okay.
Take note, Hollywood, because that's how stupid people die! Apart from these absolute BS decisions made by the flavorless main character, who had no personality other than being scared of Verity and having a really weird name, the book was good. Except for the romance, it was 24 carats, pure gold right there. Verity is a character of pure female rage, obsession, desire. Don't go saying girl boss quite yet though, because she bases her whole life around her idiot husband, that same idiot husband who everybody seems to be obsessed with in this book, when I really don't get the hype. All he did was do something a decent human being would do, and suddenly our main character is swooning while forgetting whose house she's living in. And I can honestly say that in my humble opinion, Verity deserved much more. And to be honest, this whole book is a crossover between Rebecca and Jane Eyre, and you can clearly see the influences, but I really don't mind because I love the gothic setting and I like complex female characters that have a personality, even if it's not the best personality, and I think Verity was definitely that character. Verity is a character with character, as she should be, and I understand why her back hurts and why she's bedridden, because she's been carrying the whole book on her back. So it's 4.25 stars for me, and I would recommend, if only for Verity, the star of the show. Next up, a novel whose plot has something to do with books. I mean, of course, I jumped at the chance. Emily Henry is making a huge name for herself in the romance world, and I can honestly see the attraction, pun intended. Book Lovers really stood out for me because it subverts a lot of the plot tropes that I really hate in romance novels, while also engaging in those same tropes. So it's a very self-aware type of experience, and I like that because the book kind of makes fun of other books of that genre while being a book of that genre itself. Like, it's funny to read it because you know that's exactly what you're partaking in. It shows that something can be funny and like light-hearted without necessarily forgoing the realism aspect of it. For example, no, you're probably not going to marry the guy you just met and do strange things in front of him and move in with him in 1 week because it's insta attraction that romance novels promote, and Book Lovers definitely pointed that out. I mean, sometimes your career is more important than the guy you just met, and for Nora, That is very clearly the case. She's a literary agent and she's a great one at that. She's very cutthroat, competitive, focused. She will do everything she needs for her authors. But she has a very strong relationship with her sister, and her sister clearly needs a break, so she moves to a small town for a holiday and she asks Nora to go with her. So Nora manages to tear herself away from her work just a little bit and move to this Sunshine Falls, this idyllic place. And here you would of course expect this magical power of small towns to transform our skeptical character into this down-to-earth, girl next door, happy, cheerful person. But Nora herself is very skeptical of it, and I love that it doesn't really happen. Even when she ends up falling in love, of course because it's that type of book, she still remains true to herself. Both parties in the relationship are very equal, financially, intellectually, and they support each other. While I didn't appreciate the typical romance novel, he's the perfect guy moment when they literally just met, I do have to admit that they're in a very non-toxic relationship compared to most romance novels, and he never once asked her to choose him over her career, and I think that Ross should take a lesson from that. My only problem with this book was the dialogue, and it was a significant problem because I could never imagine anyone saying what they said to each other in real life, like ever. And also because it was first-person narration, when the writing stumbled a little, you could really feel it because the main character was sort of all over the place at times. So I did not love this book, but if more romance novels were like this, then the world would be a better place, because we would actually see non-toxic relationships that come from a place of admiration and supporting each other rather than just finding each other attractive. So it's 3.5 stars for me. 2 Colleen Hoover books in one video? The co-hosts are taking over. I never knew that romance books that have that much hype around them could actually touch on dark subjects, and I'm glad Colleen Hoover showed me that that can absolutely be the case. And I'm sure Miss Hoover gets a lot of such bad puns, but she broke my heart and she definitely vacuumed up the pieces. The issue here is that unlike Verity, the reason she broke my heart was because the book was bad. And I know that you're probably familiar with the plot because at this time and age of romance books and book talk, who isn't familiar with the plot? Lily Bloom, the owner of a flower shop, and no, I don't find that name quirky, I find it ridiculous even in Verity, can we please fix the names? Lily Bloom opens a flower shop and she falls in love with this surgeon, but then her childhood love shows up and threatens their relationship. Lily and her surgeon meet on a rooftop at night, the romantic city view below them, and they start sharing trauma with each other because they find each other attractive. It gives off Gen Z energy, it's not healthy. But that being said, at least our trauma sharing generation would not be so naive as to be alone with a guy at night with no one around you who you just met because you think he's not a serial killer because you like a guy in uniform. I almost quit this book at the very start because I knew that they would fall in love. It's right there in the blurb, but seriously, not to be like stranger danger, but you don't know the guy you just met, you're sharing trauma with him and he clearly has emotional baggage and you're alone at night, God knows where. Can you please at least have done this in a cafe, in a normal setting, like normal people? And then when they do start dating, the whole thing feels extremely manipulative, not to get hate for that, but like when the worst thing that could happen happens, it's very clearly done to play with our emotions, and you will be able to predict the twist. Because just when you think, oh, if she's pregnant, it will get worse, she ends up pregnant and it gets worse. And honestly, the whole issues that they had together as a couple, and then the second guy shows up, and I admire him for treating Lily as a worthwhile human being, but he was a bit off. At the very beginning, it looked a bit like she was the bride and he was the groom. Because genuinely, I understand that it wasn't his intention, but there's just something off when he's homeless and he's sneaking into her room and they love each other and she's 15 and he's older. Like, you know, it just feels a little bit manipulative, like he was using her, and I understand that, of course, no, that wasn't the case. He genuinely loves her. I mean, how can he not? He has those flashing baby blue eyes. But like when I read that, it does not sound like something you should be telling people is okay. I love that he stood up for Lily when she was going through domestic abuse, and actually that's the only thing that made the book worthwhile in my opinion. The fact that it approached domestic abuse in a way that showed kindness and care and empathy. And I honestly really adored the character arc because, I mean, as sappy as it was, Lily went from dating a traumatized guy on the roof who she just met alone at night with absolutely zero trust issues, she just went for him, to making worthwhile decisions for herself. And I think the book is worth reading for that character arc alone. But honestly, other than that, it would be a 3 stars for me. I hope you understand why, and I would skip the read. Feel like it's time for some actual chemistry yet? Well, this next book is an actual chemistry book because it's a science book. Olive is not a writer or an agent or an owner of a flower shop. Olive is a biologist doing cancer research. She is nailing it. She's doing the most. She's like working every day, doing her best to find a cure for the disease that has killed and lost the world so many great people. And then she falls in love with her professor, who's mean to everyone, who's just very, very strict, except for her. Of course, to her, he's so sweet. He's the sweetest guy. This book takes off all of the predictable tropes, and it really doesn't make an effort other than that, starting from the very first meeting where Olive kisses a stranger in the hallway. Hear that, Lily? Take notes. If you want to do something that's ridiculous and only happens in romance novels, and that is, frankly, just makes me so uncomfortable, take a note. Don't go on the roof with a random guy. Better you kiss a stranger in the hallway. Hazelwood knew what they were doing because the book has lovable characters, and honestly, they are actually pretty lovable, except for Olive, because I can't help thinking that even though the book had a lot of conversations about consent after, she kissed someone without consent, and even though she apologized, everybody kind of brushed it off. And if the roles were reversed in a romance books, if the guy wasn't conventionally attractive, people would make a fuss, and deservedly so, because she literally just imposed herself onto another person without their consent. So when Adam made a point of asking for consent, I was like, Olive, please learn. Surprisingly, I did actually enjoy the plot as it developed. There was a lot there in terms of the cancer research and about showing how people in power can get away with stuff if other people in power don't call them out. There was a lot there on that topic, and I did enjoy that, but it was mainly a character-driven book. It was a mix of the two. It was both character and plot-driven, but it was a book that focused on the characters, and because the characters just weren't doing anything for me, I couldn't really recommend this book fully. Also, the secondhand embarrassment from literally any situation involving the two of them made me uncomfortable. It could have been a lot better. It's 3.5 stars from me. Finally, let's talk about politics, specifically the fictional politics of America's first son falling in love with the Prince of Wales. Yes, dramatic and set in a political scene, and the elements were there, the media coverage and the constant, like, intrigue, it was all there. However, it didn't really go into much depth, so it wasn't that complex, and at times it even felt superficial because issues popped up and everybody just easily solved them. Like, it was like a game of whack-a-mole, and there were issues popping up and the characters just went like bam 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 and they disappeared, and everybody was the super idealistic person who just wants the best for the world. And it was a little bit sappy, and no, it wasn't a political thriller, and no, there wasn't a debate about the merits of Marxism. It's not Sally Rooney, but I get it. It's not that kind of book. So the plot is basically that these two guys hate each other, they're rivals, they think that they're both being fake for the media, that they're not actually kind and nice and genuine. I mean, it's politics, whoever is, but people are in this book. And then their families decide to actually be fake and pretend that they're the best of friends, and then their newfound friendship blossoms into something more. It's a very simple and uplifting plot, and like I said, it's not really complex or deep or difficult in any way, and I actually like that it embraces being that kind of book, because now a lot of the books try to be like, oh, romance but with depth, and then end up failing massively. So I do like that it embraced being something that people can escape to and something that's very positive and ends up being positive, and you can learn a few positive messages from here. And the writing was also very well suited to the purpose of the book. It did make me laugh, even though it did give off 12-year-old writes fanfiction and somebody edits it and makes it into a book vibes. But other than that, it's a good book to get you out of a reading slump, and I would honestly recommend this one. So that's it. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed all my spoiler-free reviews. Verity was a clear favorite for me, so please do tell me yours in the comments. So thank you so much for watching, and please stick around.